Hi, my name is David Warner Matheson, and I was in New South Wales, Australia, driving towards Canberra, which is the Australian capital. The sun was setting, and it was a brand new sliver of a new moon, and I took this photograph of the moon over the gum trees with Venus above the moon and sinking down, following the sun, which is what happens when there's a new moon. You can think of it as the sun overtaking the moon, and then the very thin crescent, the first crescent of the new moon will appear. The sun is going down, and as the sun's rays get fainter and fainter, that beautiful crescent of the brand new moon can be seen following the sun down in the west. And I talk about the cycles of the moon in greater detail in my Celestial Mechanics and the Myths online course that you can take. It's an on-demand course. I think 11 hours of discussion of the heavenly cycles and how the ancient myths use these heavenly cycles, the cycle of the year, the cycle of the moon, other cycles, including the great cycle, the ages-long cycle of precession. And we go into the phases of the moon and what causes the phases of the moon. But this photograph, all by itself, it basically disproves flat Earth theory. And I'm going to explain a little bit about why you see the moon going down at this angle. The moon and Venus, they're following the sun down in the west at this angle in the Southern Hemisphere, and it's the opposite in the Northern Hemisphere. So this photograph all by itself basically disproves the flat Earth. And I'm going to share with you a metaphor, my patented Zeppelin metaphor, which I explain in much greater detail in that online course, Celestial Mechanics and the Myths. But this metaphor will help you to understand why you're seeing what you're seeing in the night sky, depending on what latitude you're standing on our spherical Earth, and whether you are in the Northern Hemisphere or the Southern Hemisphere. And I'm going to explain a little bit, showing with this photograph, and the sun is going down there in the west. The sun always goes down in the west, doesn't matter what hemisphere you're in, because our Earth is spinning on its axis towards the east. That's why the east coast of the United States is a time zone 3 hours ahead of the west coast. The curvature of the Earth as we spin is going to reveal the sun first in the east, and as we keep spinning, the sun will disappear beneath the western edge of the Earth, the spinning Earth. No matter where you are on the planet, it's going to be in the west. So that means, as we're looking at this photograph, the north is to the right edge. If you wanted to find north, you'd have to turn to the right as we're looking at this picture. And then you can see the moon there above the beautiful gum trees of New South Wales, Australia. So there's Venus, the moon, and the sun going down in the west. And a friend of mine, the same night in Japan, texted me this photograph that he took in Japan. So obviously, this is, again, the moon and Venus, but taken from a Northern Hemisphere location. He's located right near Tokyo, and he's in the Northern Hemisphere. So the moon going down, following the sun in the west, is going down at the opposite angle, and the sliver of the moon is pointing towards the right as we're looking at this photograph, towards the north, because we're both looking to the west. Whereas in Australia, the sliver of the moon is facing towards the left as it goes down. Now, why is that? I'm going to explain using this metaphor that I came up with as I was putting together my Celestial Mechanics and the Myths course. It's a very helpful metaphor. I've shared it with people before we go out and look at the stars at the in-person events that we do around the world. And this metaphor of the Zeppelin is very helpful, I find, in understanding why the arcs made by the planets and the sun and the moon as they go across the sky look the way they do, it'll help you understand why in the Southern Hemisphere we see the moon and Venus going down at that angle, and in the Northern Hemisphere going down at basically the opposite angle based on the latitude that you're located, that you're standing on when you're looking at the moon and the sun. So north is in that direction, and I'm going to bring in these grid lines which show the arcs of the stars as they go across the sky, and I'm going to explain why you get these patterns in a moment. But you can think of it as being inside of a gigantic Zeppelin. I'm going to show the Zeppelin in a moment, but inside the Zeppelin will be tilted at a different angle depending on where you are on our spherical Earth. But these circles are created by the fact that we're standing on a spinning globe, and so a star in the sky as we spin will make an arc, and it'll make a line through the sky. And the same thing for the sun, the moon, and the planets, except they won't stay exactly on the same line throughout the year because of the tilt of our Earth. The stars will always follow the same lines. So these lines through the sky, they're not, quote, real. They're not really out there. There's not a giant grid in the sky. The sky is not, we're not inside of a sphere. As we're turning on our spherical Earth, the objects out in the sky, including stars, planets, our sun, are going to make a circle caused by us circling. They're going to go in this direction. What's happening is the moon and the sun and Venus are arcing down in the west and tilted at this angle because of where we're located on the spherical Earth. It's a globe, and we're in Australia when I took this photograph. And my friend in Japan is seeing the arcs go in a completely different angle, and I'm going to show you why. So this is my Zeppelin metaphor. This is a photograph of the USS Los Angeles. That's that Zeppelin right there. You can see I've reversed the photograph. The words U.S. Navy. This was a Navy Zeppelin. The words are reversed because I've made the point, the front end, the bow of the Zeppelin pointing to the right because north is to the right when we're looking at a setting sun. So I had to turn it around to show you the angles of the sun and the moon setting because we're looking to the west in the photograph that we're talking about. So I had to reverse the Zeppelin so that north is to the right because I'm going to use the bow of the Zeppelin as the North Pole. So I've put the Earth, imagine that we are circling the axis, spinning on the axis, the Earth's rotation, inside of a Zeppelin. And we're rotating towards the east. So you can see North America there on the globe. The east coast is facing down, the west coast is facing up, and that sphere will be spinning towards the bottom of the screen. So the North Pole is pointing towards the tip of the Zeppelin, the bow of the Zeppelin. So we could run a line through the Earth and through the Zeppelin, and as the Earth spins, the entire sky is going to appear to rotate around a central point, and that central point, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, will be the North Celestial Pole at the very tip of the Zeppelin. And then at the stern of the Zeppelin, at the aft end, all the way down at the tip in the left side of your screen, that would be the South Celestial Pole. So if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you'll see the sky circling around a point that's marked by the letter S there in the sky, and the entire Zeppelin will appear to turn, even though we're actually on the Earth. We're turning, not the sky. The sky is not turning. The Earth is spinning. It's spinning towards the east, and so an object in the sky will appear to make a circle. it'll make a circle because the Earth is turning. If that object, such as a star, is close to the North Pole, it'll make a circle, a complete circle in the sky. It won't intersect the horizon if it's far enough to the north. But as it gets closer to the celestial equator, 90 degrees down from the North Pole, it will intersect the Earth. So we'll see that object making a circle, but part of the circle will be intersected by the Earth. And so what you're seeing here is the reason why we see arcs, why the objects in the sky make arcs through the heavens. And I explain this in a lot more detail in my Celestial Mechanics and the Myths course, but let me bring in some observers who are standing here. And so if you're standing on the Earth's equator, as these two observers are standing on the Earth's equator, you will actually see the North Celestial Pole right on the horizon. So you'd have to be maybe out in a boat in the middle of the ocean somewhere, but the North Celestial Pole would be on the northern horizon, and the whole sky would be turning around the North Celestial Pole in that direction. And you could turn around and look at the South Celestial Pole on the opposite horizon, the southern horizon, and the whole sky would appear to be turning around that South Celestial Pole, and all the objects in the sky, the stars, the sun, the moon, the planets, will be making circles overhead, and those circles will be basically vertical. As you can see, these observers on the equator, they're watching as the Earth is turning. Objects in the sky, planets, stars, are rising in the east, going straight up overhead in a circle, and then setting in the west. And they will intersect with the ocean. If we're sitting in a boat out in the middle of the ocean, they'll intersect with the ocean on that circle, but the circles will be basically 90 degrees vertical, going straight up overhead, because they're on the equator and the Earth is turning around its axis. And at that point, the 2 points of the axis will be a point in the sky, and everything else will make circles around those 2 points. Like I said, I explain this in greater detail in my course, but this is a very helpful metaphor. The reason I use a Zeppelin is Zeppelins have that rigid framework. You can see the lines of the Zeppelin. They're basically girders, beams to make a rigid structure, and then they also have hoops. Now, if our observers in that boat, right on the equator, in the middle of the ocean, start to sail towards the north, they're going to move to a different latitude. The farther they go to the north, the more they're going to curve around this spherical Earth, but they won't feel like they're tilted. They'll feel like down is still straight down beneath their feet because they're being pulled towards the center of this spherical Earth. But what will happen is they will feel that the whole Zeppelin has tilted. The whole sky has tilted up. They've moved north along the ocean, and as they've done so, the North Pole will rise up. As they move towards that North Pole, curving along the spherical Earth to a higher latitude in the north, the North Pole will come up out of the horizon and rise up overhead. If they sail all the way up to the North Pole, it'll be straight up overhead, but we've stopped about 30-something degrees north latitude. Now the North Pole, the north bow of that Zeppelin, has come up out of the water. When they're looking due north, they're going to see all the stars circling around that North Celestial Pole, making a circle. Depending on how far away that star is from the North Pole, the circle will be farther away from the North Celestial Point. But the whole sky will be rotating around that North Celestial Pole, and because of the curvature of the Earth, they will no longer be able to see the South Celestial Pole, the tail end of the Zeppelin. It will be down beneath the horizon at all times. If they were to sail the opposite way, however, the Zeppelin would tilt the opposite direction. But look at the angle of the circles. So now, an object that's going right along the celestial equator, 90 degrees down from the North Celestial Pole, that ring that's going around the Earth, See how it's going to intersect? If you're facing west, looking straight into the picture, and watching the sun and the moon go down in the west, it's going to go down at an angle that's similar to what you're seeing right there on the page where I have this picture of the ring around the earth. That's the path made by something on the celestial equator going down in the west. And you can see it cuts down at an angle. If I'm looking to the west, that angle is tilted towards the south. Whereas if I were to sail the opposite direction and go down towards Australia, I'm going to curve down on the southern hemisphere. I'm going to then start to bring the southern celestial pole up out of the water. The whole sky will now be rotating around a point at the tail of the Zeppelin. I won't be able to see the north celestial pole anymore. And look at the angle that objects in the sky will set in the west. They'll come down basically from right to left, from north. They're tilted to the north because the whole Zeppelin has tilted. Why is the whole Zeppelin tilted? Because I've sailed down towards the southern hemisphere. And that's why in the photograph, the sun and the moon in the southern hemisphere, the photograph that I took from the region of Canberra, Australia, the sun had gone down in the west, and then the moon was following at an angle from the northern side as opposed to an angle from the southern side like my friend in Japan. And we can see this in Stellarium. This is a screenshot from the free online planetarium called Stellarium, and we're looking towards the west. You can see the W there on your horizon on the screen. This is a screenshot of Stellarium on the night that I took that photograph. I've moved the time back to when I took that photograph. I've moved the location to Canberra, Australia, and you can see that the sun has gone down in the west, and then the moon and the planet Venus are following at a tilted angle, and that angle is tilted towards the north. So let's go into Stellarium and you can see it. If I move the location to Tokyo, then we'll be in the northern hemisphere, and the sun and the moon will be going down at an angle that is different because the whole Zeppelin has tilted because we've moved to a northern hemisphere latitude, and now the angle that they're coming in is from the left side of the screen, and they're following the sun down to the west, but the whole Zeppelin has tilted, and that's why the moon appears with a sliver of it towards the right, and it's coming in from the left if we're in the northern hemisphere. But if we're in the southern hemisphere, the illuminated edge is on the left side of the moon, and it's coming in at an angle from the right, from the north, instead of from the south. Why? Because of the Zeppelin. And that proves, without even going into outer space, that we're on a spherical Earth. Flat Earth proponents can try and explain this. I don't know how you would really explain this from the perspective of a flat Earth. The whole flat Earth movement just appeared out of nowhere. Its proponents are often very belligerent, rude, make ad hominem attacks, attacking the person instead of arguing their case. It's almost certainly an operation, a psyop. It appeared out of nowhere. I was making videos well before the flat earth fanaticism just suddenly appeared. It appeared like someone just flipped a switch, and all of a sudden I was getting all kinds of flat earth comments on my videos. I've even had like YouTube put up a warning on one of my videos. Flat earth has been disproven. I don't know why they put that warning on my video, because I don't argue for a flat earth. The flat earth can be disproven without going up in a rocket into outer space and looking at the earth from that perspective. You can simply go to the southern hemisphere and observe the different pathways of the stars and the sun and the moon and the planets from the perspective of the Southern Hemisphere versus the Northern Hemisphere and understand that we're on a spherical Earth, as I just explained to you. But there are people who believe that the flat Earth operation was engineered in order to discredit people who are showing falsehoods that are being propagated by NASA. If NASA is lying to us, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're on a flat Earth. So by doing this aggressive flat Earth campaign, you can defuse people who are showing that NASA is lying to us in certain circumstances, including perhaps the moon landings of 1969 through 1972. If NASA is faking the moon landings, it does not logically follow that we're on a flat Earth. So by putting out this aggressive flat Earth psyop, you can lump anyone who criticizes NASA into, oh, you must be a flat earther. Or by extension, you can do that with people who are talking about other operations where we're clearly being lied to. What happened on September 11th is clearly, in 2001, it was clearly something completely different than what we've been told. The cause of those buildings coming down is completely different than the official story, but you can lump people into, oh, you must believe in a flat Earth if you dare to question the official narrative on September 11th, what happened on September 11th, 2001, or the assassination of President Kennedy. If you question the official story, which is complete nonsense, what happened on November 22nd, 1963, in the assassination of JFK is completely different than the official story that was sold to the American people and to the people of the world. They were lied to. If you're pointing out those lies, you can now be lumped in with, oh, you must be a flat earther. So the flat Earth operation is almost certainly a highly coordinated psyop originating in the establishment circles, the people who are trying to discredit anyone who questions the official narrative. But it's ludicrous. We are not on a flat Earth. It may well be that we're in a solar system that is a binary. In other words, the sun has a binary companion, and it's very different than this Copernican or Johannes Kepler model that we've been aggressively told is the only possible explanation for the solar system. But that doesn't mean we're on a flat Earth. We're not on a flat Earth. This one photograph from Canberra, Australia, of the new moon sliver following behind the sun with Venus overhead from the Southern Hemisphere basically proves beyond a doubt that we're on a spherical Earth. Thank you so much for listening.